folks, welcome to Psyop Homestead. This is Travis here at the Prepared Homestead. Well, we finally got some rain around here. It hasn't rained for at least a month, at least a measurable amount of rain. We've actually been under drought conditions, and over the last 4 or 5 weeks, the only rain we've gotten is for a few seconds, literally, a drizzle. And finally today, we got about 1.5 inches over about a 30-minute period. I knew it was going to rain because I started to mow the yard. Yep, that's, wash your car or start to mow your yard and it'll rain. So that was the way to get it to rain, was to go out and mow the yard. We still need more, and there is more in the forecast later on this week, and I'm hoping we get it because it's starting to dry up. The field's looking really dry. Been having to do a lot of watering on the garden to keep it green, so we can certainly use the rain, but thank goodness we finally got some. So today's video is kind of a two-parter, two kind of separate subjects. The first thing I want to talk about is prepping for things that a lot of times preppers don't think about. They may not always get covered in your typical prepping websites and videos, because a lot of prepping, not all of it, but a lot of it focuses on storing up a bunch of food and having like bug out bag stuff. And there's just, it seems to, a lot of it kind of stops there, food, first aid supplies, and then, bug out bags. Well, for those of us that are homesteaders or that have our own piece of property and we have no plans of bugging out unless there are a few special circumstances, you need to prepare to be on your property and prepare like the world is ending. And I talked about this before in another video recently, where you should prepare as if you need to prepare for primitive things, meaning that what if the system around you collapses so much that you aren't able to get the things you need to support the tools that you have. And what I'm getting at is, say for instance, gasoline. You can only store up so much gasoline because gasoline only lasts so long. It has really a relatively short shelf life. And I understand you can add additives to it, but you can't store up, at least the typical person, hundreds and hundreds of gallons of gasoline. And then, like I said, even with additives, it only has so long of a shelf life. And so if part of your preparedness plan is to fall back on certain machinery and tools that require that, what happens if the system fails to the point that there is a shortage of gasoline, or maybe no gasoline altogether? So you need to have backup plans for that. And so I always tell people, I get a lot of questions of, what are you preparing for? What are you prepping for? And for me, it's basically a complete collapse of civilization. Doesn't mean that I expect that will happen. But in doing so, you pretty much cover all the bases of everything else. Even if, an ice storm happens and your power's down for a couple of weeks. Well, if you've prepared for the, complete end of civilization, you've certainly got enough stuff and preparations to get you through that ice storm. So make sure you have the things that you need to support your homestead. You may be cut off from the outside world. The outside world may collapse so much, the system may collapse so much that you are truly on your own. It may not happen, but you should prepare for that way. So, not just preparing food, and food is certainly a huge thing to prepare. I always tell people 1.5 to 3 years. Really, 3 years is like the goal for me to prepare for. 2 to 3 years, certainly. And medical supplies, and of course, guns, ammunition, things to protect yourself and your family and your farm and all that. But there's all this other stuff. There's all kinds of tools and things that you need. Stuff like a flour mill, things like grinding, just food grinders. And I would recommend getting the manual ones. They make new ones, but you can still find the old ones too. I see all the time around here at flea markets and little secondhand stores, those old-fashioned hand crank food grinders. Those things are excellent. Get you one of those. Plenty of canning supplies. Things like pressure cookers and stuff that you need to preserve your food. Also make plans for meat. If you raise meat animals, the things that you need to process them and the things that you need to preserve them. Because if you're depending upon going to a butcher, a meat processor to have your meat butchered and put up and then put into a freezer, well, what happens if that guy shuts down, or he's so backed up that you can't get to him, or maybe the grid goes down and your freezer no longer works? What are you going to do then? So you need to have plans of how to take care of these things on your own without any outside help or any help from a system like the grid or anything. Also, along with animals, so if you're going to raise animals, do you have the things you need to take care of them? What are you going to do about food for the animals? What are you going to do about the medical needs that the animal has? I mean, all animals from time to time have medical needs. Do you know how to take care of that for yourself? Do you have things to stitch up a wound? To help with birthing of an animal, to help with if they get attacked and they need to be taken care of, if they have parasites, worms, things like that. Do you have the things that you need to take care of your animals? They're not going to do you much good if you don't have those things, and then the system is shut down or collapses or whatever happens, and well, you can't take care of your animals and they die. So do these things. Another thing that I talk about is, for instance, a lot of people, especially around here, they use wood heat to heat their homes in the wintertime, and it can get quite cold here. Most people use chainsaws nowadays. They cut the trees down with a chainsaw, split it up. Maybe they have a log splitter. Well, what happens if the system fails so much that you aren't able to get the gasoline? What if your chainsaw breaks and you don't have parts for it? Maybe you have parts for it, but you run out of gasoline. So having things like spare parts for your chainsaw, maybe a spare chainsaw, but also having the old-fashioned crosscut saws. It's much harder work to do it that way, but people did that for years and years and years, and it's very possible. It's something you can do. Is cutting your own wood and splitting it all completely by hand without machinery. So having these kinds of backup plans are really something that a lot of you need to start thinking of, because things just don't look that good. I think my last video or the one before, I talked about the dollar, the gold value going up. There's a lot of talk about that. And that could be potentially one of those silent killers that everyone's so focused on, virus, they're focused on rioting, they're focused on election, and then all of a sudden the dollar collapses. I mean, the Fed is dumping trillions and trillions of dollars into the market, money that, a lot of people don't even want or don't even need, but they're dumping that into the market. And I'm not even talking about just the little stimulus checks that they're sending out, because it's way more than just that. We were already at almost a breaking point, really a breaking point. I mean, before this happened, I was already surprised that the dollar was holding any of its value. And here we are in 1 year dumping trillions and trillions of dollars into the economy, into an economy that's nearly come to a halt. In some fields is very stagnant. Businesses all across America, small and large, are shutting down. Hundreds of thousands and thousands of small mom and pop businesses, which is really the backbone of the economy. And then many hundreds of large, big corporations have shut down, gone bankrupt, or closing down lots and lots of their stores. So, unemployment is still really high. And there's only so many Band-Aids that you can stick on that bubble before it blows. And don't buy into the argument that America is too big to fall, because, folks, I'm telling you, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And when America, that bubble bursts here in the United States, it's going to be awful. And I think part of it is to push in an era of digital currency. I mean, we're seeing these ridiculous shortages of coin. You're seeing businesses all over saying that they're no longer accepting anything except plastic, digital currency, credit cards, debit cards, that kind of stuff. We're going to see that more and more. So folks, getting ready in a way that you can really sustain yourself is more imperative now than I believe it's ever been. Many of us old school preppers, and I consider myself that one, even though I'm not as old as many of you. I've been doing this most of my life and grew up around it. We've talked about this kind of stuff most of our lives, the what ifs, the possibilities. And here we are in an era, in a day that while we've talked about it and we've prepared for it, I think many of us are even a little bit surprised that it's as bad as it is, and it's happening as quickly as it is. And there's so many different things. I think most preppers, they plan for one thing, or they plan for this thing, or they have this thing, and guess what? It's all happening, and it's all happening at once. And when that happens, I don't know that you can maybe keep the dam up when there's one big old crack in it, but when you've got a half a dozen and more are forming, it gets to the point that the dam is no longer able to be saved. And I think that's what we are seeing here in America and really around the world. So looking at it where you're preparing for the end of everything really gets you more prepared. Don't buy into these, from the government or even some of these preppers, like you need to have 2 weeks supply or you need to have 3 months supply. Don't do that. Don't set your goalposts that low, okay? Are you going to get ready and have enough preparations for the apocalypse, for the end of civilization, for the complete downfall of mankind? Probably not. Very, very few people will ever be that prepared. But at least setting your goal that high and understanding in your mind the things that you need to do to get to that point, you'll know what you need versus, well, I just need enough to get me through a couple of weeks. Well, goodness, I can go to the grocery store and get enough to get us through for a couple of weeks with a little bit of money, really. That's not really that prepared. It's a start, and don't get discouraged if that's all you have. But you certainly need to set that goal pretty high, because the way things are looking, the things that are happening here in the United States, all across the globe, it's setting ourselves up for that. And if there was ever a time in any kind of modern history, I would say at least over the last few centuries, and maybe throughout all history, for there to be a major reset of civilization, of our whole society, I think that now is a better time than it's ever been. So it's just like all the game pieces are being set up on the chessboard for a complete catastrophic failure. And that's really where we need to be. So in saying that, I kind of leading into the next part is, because of the type of world that we live in, we have to be careful what we buy into and what bandwagon we jump on. And I know that many of my viewers think this way because you comment often that on this, that you're very logical, rational thinkers, that you don't just see two sides to a coin. You see that there's other options, or that there's other things going on. And when I say because of the time that we live in with the internet, the way it is, and social media, it's so easy to fake things. It's so easy to get one person out there in front and for them to be the new hero, the new leader of the movement, just because they made a few sound bites that sound really good. It's really hard anymore to know what truly is the truth and not. You know, is there even really a virus? Is the virus deadly? Is it really that deadly? Is it worse than it is? Is it man-made? Is it lab-created? Is it the cold? Is it, you know, not even a virus? You know, does a mask work? Does it work sometimes? Does it never work? Does it work all the time? You know, I mean, there's no end to it. And I think sometimes what I sit back and I see, especially online, but even amongst my own friends and family, is that everyone is lined up on two sides, just like two political parties, and it's pretty much divided along those lines. That there are only two options out there. It's either the Republicans or Democrats. There's only two options politically, not just for candidates, but I mean the actual philosophical thought that you either think like a Republican or you think like a Democrat, and there's no room for anything in between or outside those two. And I think most of you realize, and I hope you do, is that there are many other ways to think than just like a Republican or Democrat. While I will admit that typically the Republicans are more conservative, and many of them, not all, but many lean to the side of a less government, less intrusion, but certainly not all. And while most Democrats are quite liberal, I know some personally that aren't. So we cannot, and I caution you because of the times that we live in, that there's this big push. There's this, everything's like a psyop, it seems like. Everything is misinformation, is to get you pulled to one side or to the next, or to discredit one side or the next. And so don't just buy into everything that you read just because maybe that person supports your candidate. Don't just buy into everything you read just because it sounds like it supports your theories already, your preset, you know, ideas, so it must be right, isn't it? We have to be open-minded. We have to, especially when it comes to the things that are happening in the world, you know. I mean, there's certain things that I'm this way and you're not going to change me, and usually that's when it comes to my morals and, of course, my relationship with the Father. But there are things in this world that are happening, conspiracies, overt government operations, things in the media, things on social media, that it gets quite confusing. And so we have to be careful what we jump on the bandwagon of, because just because they might support the guy in office that you like or the guy running for office that you like doesn't always mean that they're right. And we have this idea, like I said, that there's only two sides, and the reality is that there are two sides to the same coin. They're two wings of the same bird, folks. And I know that many of my listeners agree with that because you comment very often that while there may be a guy in White House that does some things that we like, that doesn't always mean that he's really there for us little guys. Maybe sometimes he is. But we have to be very careful and realize that in the end, government's job, especially the United States government anymore, isn't always really looking out for you and I. It's really to protect themselves and protect their corporate interests and to protect their banking interest and those that rule the world's interests. So I know that really doesn't have a lot to do with prepping or especially homesteading, but it's something that it's just kind of a burning inside of me, and I wanted to get it out. And I think that many of you will understand what I'm saying, that just because it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck nowadays doesn't always mean it's a duck. We have to really do our own research and search our own hearts and use our own minds to try to figure out if what we're seeing and what we're reading is really worthwhile, because it's so easy anymore to really manipulate the people, and that's really in the end what it is. It's just mass manipulation. And do your best not to allow that to happen to yourselves. All right, folks. Boy, I was all over the board today. Thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.